Perfect. Thank you for joining us, all of you, and thank you for joining us. We're going to start with a brief introduction of everybody. Lily, we'll start with you. Just a short, brief introduction.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Lily. I'm partner at Tokar Strategic Advisors. We are an international cannabis advisory firm, and we essentially bolt onto the teams and leadership of large mainstream companies, investors, or entrepreneurs looking to enter the cannabis space. And we can help them with all things from market entry to finding the right partners, vetting potential investors, and helping to really just provide some deep cannabis knowledge to whether it's a tobacco company, an alcohol company, a food or drink company, and really help to bolt on. So pleasure to be here.
Yeah, my name is Stefan Röhrl. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Hemp Group. Hemp Group is one of the leading CBD companies in Germany. We do a lot of white labeling, private labeling. We have right now 12 retail stores all over Germany. We run a quite successful affiliate program together with the Süddeutsche Zeitung. The Süddeutsche Zeitung is the second biggest newspaper in Germany, very conservative, but if they speak about cannabis, the people trust them even more if just we speak about cannabis. Beside that, I run cannabis social clubs in Spain for over 15 years. I had clubs in Barcelona for 9 years. The last 5 years, I got clubs in Ibiza. And for the upcoming, or for the cannabis legalization in Germany, we found a new company, Luxora, where we provide grow knowledge. We have a grow hub where we grow for clubs and have solutions for the cannabis clubs market in Germany.
So, hello from my side. My name is Songmin Pyo. I'm Korean, so very far away. However, cannabis is a very interesting topic for us because, I'm a pharmacist by training, and our company tries to make cannabis a real medicine for everyone who is in need of it, like painkiller, for example, cancer therapy, epilepsy. So there's so plenty of room and playground for cannabis, and therefore I'm here, and very nice to be here and talk to the others.
Hi everyone, Deepak Anand here. I've been in the industry just over 12 years. I started off as an advisor to Health Canada when Canada was looking at legalization. I helped them first with the medical cannabis program and then eventually setting up the recreational cannabis program. I also have a background in pharmaceuticals and have set up EU GMP distribution and medical cannabis companies across Europe. And I'm currently doing consulting with tobacco and pharma companies, much like Lily and Georgia are.
Thank you, guys. That made it easier for me. So let's just jump right in. Let's start with what expertise can NGP and tobacco firms bring to the table for collaboration? That was yours, Deepak.
Okay, happy to go. So, look, I think tobacco companies have spent a bunch of time developing IP and expertise on products like heat not burn, on vape products, and a bunch of other delivery systems, including pouches. And I know pouches have been talked about quite a bit. So this is really just one more ingredient that you're adding to those products. And I think the deep work that's gone into inhalation and heat not burn, all the technologies, it's very easy to apply cannabinoids to that, and I think that's the expertise that they kind of bring to this space. Whereas if you look at traditional players, whether it be North America or Canada or in Europe, they basically are just selling flowers and extracts and oils and don't have that expertise. So it's a real marriage for big tobacco to bring a lot of their IP into this and start to add cannabinoids to that.
Very true, very true. Lily, what can these companies do to make themselves more attractive for the cannabis industry?
For sure. I think when we look at how the tobacco companies are viewing the sector, they are not necessarily viewing it as an immediate revenue stream, and they are very much enjoying exploring the process, taking their time, and they've learned from some of the past mistakes of the first investments and some of the alcohol investments. And I think it's a rare opportunity to have firms with capital, the ability to build and scale global brands, and to not be chasing immediate revenues, because I think that's what's slowing a lot of cannabis innovation down. the fact that companies are struggling to pay even tax bills and stay profitable, let alone to innovate. Tobacco companies, what they can offer, and other large NGP firms, is the ability to use some of that spare capital, and also that's not just financial, that's human capital. They're huge teams, R&D capacity, compliance teams, and really be able to give a bit of that more structured approach to cannabis companies.
And then I have a question for everyone here, but this is also more towards Sung. What about the health factors? I mean, I know this is a topic that is very, very, something that a lot of people don't want to touch on so much. So let's talk about how do we know the future when we're talking about the role? How do we know the future of it when it's related to our health?
So there are two aspects. First of all, the raw material itself. One big issue to use cannabinoids in health sector is that the plants are plants, they are natural. It means it's like when you go to the grocery store and then buy a banana. Sometimes they are really sweet, sometimes they taste like nothing. And this happened as well to the cannabinoids in the plant. And to get this really harmonized, to get a high quality cannabis is really difficult, and it's underestimated so far. Everyone is talking about, I have the best plant, but it's independence of summer, sunlight, daylight, and so on and so forth. So I think the first big bucket we have to be challenged on is the quality of the raw material. And the second is, as you already mentioned, it really depends on how we are applying it to the body. There are pouches, there are solutions, there are also infusions, inhalations, and there are big differences in how it acts in the body. For example, the World Health Organization took advantage of it and says, in the body, there is definitively a receptor, so there is an effect on the body, and it's good for the body because you have a pain release, for example, right? Stomach ache can be treated by this, and there are so many people, somehow using it. On the other hand, they are also arguing only 6% of what you are taking in are also uptaken by the body. It means 94% are inefficient. So it really depends on what for quality we are starting with and how we are formulating it so that we can take and consume it to us, that we can have health benefit, yes or no. And this is quite challenging at the moment.
If I can just add a comment, I think it's also interesting to look at the risks because we know that it's not a benign substance and there is, for example, CBD has toxicity at a very high dosage. Like Sativex comes with a black box warning for toxicity. So I think it's important to balance the sort of benefits with the risks. And I think that's another thing that tobacco companies can really offer here is doing that research. I think companies that are in the industry are so busy trying to get to market that they've skipped that safety element a bit. And I think that's one more area from a health perspective that you can look at.
And I would say, from the German perspective, with the new upcoming, I don't like to call it legalization because it is not, it's like a part decriminalization, but even that gives out the vaping industry a huge new opportunity because that opened up the market for a lot of consumers for products they never had access to before because the black market dealers normally doesn't have like oils, extracts, shatter and all that, and that's even more to vape that, to dab that, that's a more healthy way to consume these kinds of cannabis products than before. And if you look into the US, what kind of products are there available, this is also totally new for Germany. And I think with this like decriminalization, now the society speaks more about it. It's not like a topic anymore that you have to speak on the closed doors and behind. No, you can. The consumers can educate themselves even more. You can speak with your parents about it, Since the legalizations get started, I get more and more also a question from older people. Everybody wants to try to grow their own now. Everybody wants to put some seeds on the balcony or in the garden and see what's happened. We know that they don't really get any good results, but for them, everybody could make their own tomatoes. Sometimes people try it out for fun, and it's the same like this, but I think it's a really huge opportunity for a big opening market for the vaping industry.
But then here's a question that might be a little tricky, but when it comes to the tobacco industry, right, do you see that the cannabis industry is actually further advanced because it is under so much scrutiny?
I'd say from a cultivation perspective, definitely. I think what the cannabis industry has going for it, they understand genetics, plant breeding, and cultivation super well. If you look at Canada, Colombia, a variety of different countries across the globe, they've really got that part dialed down. I think when it comes to product innovation, just because the industry's been forced to get up and running so quickly, we haven't seen that level of innovation happen. And I think that's where tobacco companies are perhaps more advanced. And certainly on IP and product formulation, tobacco companies are far ahead.
And I totally agree with that. And then here's another question. What about the fact that, so we're here with all these different types of vape products. How do we actually know they're not so bad for us? Who's testing that? What are the standards in place?
Yeah, so I know Canopy Growth in Canada did a bunch of work on discovering certain ingredients in CBD and THC vapes that are harmful and ended up setting up some standards, but really we're just scratching the surface right now. I think it's still very early days. To answer your question, we don't know that the products in the market are safe or not, and I think that's what we've got to do more of.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We do not know it yet because there are not standardized studies ongoing at the moment, and we are barely starting the standardized one in a high quality, how to deliver the data as well, because I mean, we are in the century where we can use AI, where we can also have deep learning, and we can generate data and try to find the best way out of it, and this is still missing. But I think this year and last year in December, a big study has started in 3 countries to see what for products are harmful, what for risks we have. So therefore, I think in 1 or 1.5 years, we will have finally the answer for this.
Did you guys want to add anything to that, or?
I think it's also important when we look at the hardware being used and how the hardware is sometimes not being optimized for cannabis. We're seeing sometimes conventional e-liquid hardware being used with cannabis liquids which are the wrong viscosity or they're the wrong fit. We're sometimes then seeing heavy metals leach in when ceramic kind of chambers aren't being used or the right sort of materials aren't being used. And I think that's even more complicated when you see different carrier oils being mixed in some of these semi-grey market cannabis vapes.
And the super synthetic terpenes as well.
Synthetic terpenes, exactly. And terpenes can be very corrosive if you don't have the right hardware to partner with them. You can, again, face issues. So there's a huge realm of cannabis and tobacco niches that need to be kind of combined to make sure that the products are safe. And we do really need to be testing this because these combinations of hardware and inputs are often not the right fit.
Yeah, it's not just a plug and play.
I would say Lily hit a good point. Because when it comes to cannabis, you have other viscosity, it's more thick than other e-liquids. And you have to also have in mind that a lot of cannabis is a medicine. So a lot of consumer will consume it out for medical reasons. And for them, it's even more important that the hardware doesn't contain heavy metals. And even if you use this refilled vaping stuff like as a e-cigarette, it doesn't work for cannabis because it burns. And then it's not healthy anymore. If you have a fresh hardware, it's no problem. But how long? I would say it's just for one time or for one use. You cannot refill it because then the problem starts.
And I would just want to bring up, I think, Lily, you bring up a really good point on hardware. I mean, we found this in Canada very early on where people were putting CBD distillate into tobacco hardware and we realized it actually crystallizes.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point in that it's not a plug and play mechanism. You really need to play with the distillate or the isolate or whatever inputs are actually going into it to understand if the molecule is actually going to work with the device or not. It's a really good point.
So who's going to do that?
Well, people are doing that now, right? I mean, it's trial and error. So in Canada, we saw crystallization on CBD vapes with PGVG, and they had to take it off the market. So that work is ongoing, and I think who's going to do the hard work? It's going to be the big tobacco companies. We've already seen BAT invest a ton of money into Project Jupiter, which is Organigram. We've seen PMI and others get into the space, and Japan Tobacco is looking at it. I think those are the guys that are going to do really the heavy lifting from a safety perspective.
I agree on it, and I also think the main driver for such kind of market is the consumer itself. When the consumers get the awareness of the quality, then everyone is forced to do it. So it means one is a unique selling point. When I have a higher quality, is someone ready to sell and buy more from me with a higher quality of it? And therefore, I think the main driver, as usual on the open market, is the customer at the end. He will force us to do, or force the companies to do, so that they can survive in this market.
So then this poses another challenge, I think, when you look at it that way, that if the consumer is not fully aware or educated, and normally consumers go more with trends, so this is actually going to set a lot of things behind if it is so focused on the consumer behavior. So how can that be something that, what's a way to kind of counterbalance that? What do you guys think?
I would doesn't say the cannabis consumer. I would say on the one hand, we have the called potheads. They will always love to smoke a joint. They don't use like a vaping device. But when you see how it all started also in the US, like the soccer mom thing, they don't know how to roll a joint. They had the vape pen. And the pros for the vape pen is you don't smell it, so you can use it like everywhere. Even and it's easy to use, and that's why it's going further. And I would say here in Germany, I always speak from the German perspective. We have right now also the chances, and I see like really interesting new products coming up, like vaping devices where you can vape herbs and like oils or extracts. Because the most people doesn't want to carry like 2 or 3 devices. You want to have one device for all. And that brings also, I think, a huge opportunity for the vaping industry to develop that kind of products.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, it's really trial and error. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is an experiment play out in front of us. I think everyone needs to understand legalization is a process, not an event. So unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of back and forth. And that's true, right? I mean, we're a nascent new industry, so it's going to be that trial and error and taking products on the market and taking them off and then figuring out what works. But I really want to come back to this being a process versus an event.
But then who's responsible?
Yeah,
this is the thing, like who's going to step up? And if you're a manufacturer and there's only so much the regulations actually allow for this gray area for people to kind of almost be misled, let's say. When do these clinical trials actually come in front of people, and when do the consumers start asking questions? Hey, is this good for me? Is this the right option, or is this the suitable thing that I need? When do we start getting the consumer to ask for that, and who's responsible for that?
Well, I think it's already happening, right? I think now if you look at North America, it's very common for consumers to ask for COAs. And in fact, you've got brands that are posting COAs on websites now. That's the customer saying, hey, I actually want to know what went into this product. Forget about cannabinoids, definitely want to know about cannabinoids, but I also want to know about terpenes. I want to look at additives. So it's very common practice for COAs to go on.
COA is like not even such a big deal. What about the
heavy metals?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really up to regulators, right? And I think that's where there's this balance of risk. I mean, you look at Canada as an example, the regulator doesn't actually approve these products. They allow you to sell them, which is why insurance for cannabis companies on certain products are through the roof, right? I think one of the biggest struggles that tobacco companies are having today is understanding the risk element and understanding insurance, because there have been litigation and lawsuits in Canada as an example.
So is the tobacco industry, and don't take this personally, anyone, but is that, because we know the chemicals that go into tobacco, and that's become stabilized and normalized and accepted, and it's been accepted for decades. Is that something that can actually pollute the cannabis industry? What if we're looking at like the future doesn't always necessarily mean it's something positive? What about this path?
Yeah, look, I mean, at least from my perspective, I think, look, the big tobacco has learned some really hard lessons, and at least the companies that I work with, I think, have come out the other side actually understanding and realizing the lessons that are learned and not making the same mistakes. In many ways, actually, I see some of the cannabis companies making the exact same mistakes that the tobacco companies were making a while ago. So I think it's a bit inverse right now, where you've got the tobacco companies actually enlightening to the fact that they understand the risks, whereas cannabis companies are making them. That's what I see in the market.
Yeah, and I think we saw it like a couple of years ago in the US. You always say that's a trial and error, but the risk is, if you think back about the E vitamin thing, what's happened in the US with the vaping cartridges, and that's why I'm not a big fan of the trial and error. I think, like we in Germany did it differently than in the US. We have to prove before we bring it out. That's different kind of strategy. Maybe that's why it takes a bit longer if we get new products on the market.
No, and that's a huge difference, actually. That's a good thing to bring up because that's a cultural reference as well, because North America does operate very differently from the rest of Europe. And you can already see just how Switzerland has initiated the pilot project, how Germany is going about things and setting certain standards into place, which is going to definitely lead the industry globally furthermore. But yeah, this whole, let's just see what happens, and and then we'll deal with the lawsuits later is probably not the best approach.
It's happening.
But it's really difficult because I'm also located in Germany, so therefore I know they're really accurate. They love laws, they love regulations. But when it comes to vaping and the new things, they are totally lost. Why? Because the history is that they have laws and rules, and now, oh gosh, I have to think about. And the problem from the scientific point of view is that even the analytical methods are not made to identify all the compounds in it. So it means when I do not know what's in it, because I can't analyze it, how should I know what I have to do? I can only see there are crystals, I can only see somehow the color is different, but we have no analytical methods. So therefore, I think German try and error is good somehow, but also risky, as you mentioned before, how we control the risk. And therefore, I think Germany, especially in Europe, is most hesitant to say yes or no, and let's see what will happen there.
And then we're going to go into the whole next generation product, right? So now we have, let's say we have the best raw material product, the best of the best. There's nothing better. And then now we turn to a device. How do we know that that's going to be the best for that, to ensure that the entire process and the product itself delivers in a healthy, good way?
Same inputs in these various formats leads to wildly ineffective products. We've seen, for example, in the UK, some new entrants to the CBD snus market, and they're just adding simple isolate to that. Now, CBD isn't really very water soluble, it's kind of lipophilic, and you're finding that just none of that is being absorbed. Again, CBD pouches in the UK fall out of regulation, so there's not really a clear guideline. So I think when we really don't have tailored ingredients, as you mentioned, the products are just not going to work, and this is such a new category that consumers are trying that for the first time, and if their first experiences is this doesn't work, whether that's a vape and a drink, CBD drink, we've had the same issues with the isolate sticking to the sides of the can and none of it being consumed. So without investing in technologies like nano-emulsions, actually really looking into those methods, the products will continue to be poor quality.
Just on the regulations, can I make one counterpoint? I think it's very important, as much as we are trying to regulate, I'm a huge fan of regulations, let's not forget there's an illicit market, right? And that illicit market is putting all kinds of products on it, right? So I think the challenge that we've seen, and I think I always focus back to Canada, is you look at the mistakes that we made and we highly regulated this product, right? So, and as a result, there are certain products that consumers only buy in the illicit market because they're getting the 100 milligrams THC, as an example. So I think it's really important to balance those two, because one of the goals of any legalization approach should be transition of sort of illicit to licit markets.
So, and then I think the onus falls on the governments, and this is where it's like, again, the question I always want to ask is who's responsible for this consumer behavior and the lack of, the ignorance, for lack of a better word. But if the consumer doesn't know, so maybe, for example, Germany is now allowing for this, there should be something like commercials or somewhere that you're able to learn, and it's put in your face that this is how you cultivate, this is how you should consume, this is what you should look for, this is what you should expect. And that's again not doing the trial and error. I think it's I don't think anybody's taking the right responsibility when it comes to manufacturers and suppliers and governments.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what I see in the last couple of months, I was deeply involved in the new law process, and there you see that the most people who are responsible for that have no clue about that. They have no clue about cannabis. They
That's
don't
clear.
know.
Yeah.
They don't know what kind of regulation they put out. So in this case, it will be a kind of trial and error. But I think that's a big danger for the consumers, this kind of...
Even cultivating your own flower, if you don't know what you're doing, you could be putting in the heavy metals from the soil because you don't know what quality to use. And you're not curing properly or whatever.
Yeah, and I think exactly on one point, because when you do it on your own, you have no clue. Over 90% of self-grown cannabinoids are with fungus because they do not know how to do, because they think it must be warm and wet, and then fungus is blooming, and they're like, okay, it should be green, it's white, it should be okay because it's nature, and then it comes to this problem, exactly, right? Yeah.
Well, if you want the most risk-averse program, you should look at Switzerland, because Switzerland allows a pilot project, right? So they're doing everything through pharmacies, as an example, right? In most places, and that really is tracking public health outcomes, right? So how does someone feel? How is their blood pressure? How is their mental health? So I think that type of a pilot project really allows for a bit more trial and error. Unfortunately, I don't know how you get around trial and error. That's the only way it's going to have to happen. But at least this pilot project allows you to control it and dial it back as you need to. So that, I think, is a good approach.
I think overall what I was ranting about was there is a lack of education that's involved. And I think back to how we were saying the consumers driving the market, because the consumers drive the illicit market as well, right? This is a big thing to look at. And I think the only solution would be to provide more information that's readily available, and especially if it's legal, it should be on TV. We see these 2-minute ads of like stupid things. There should be things that are actually teaching us something that's beneficial for our health.
I would say an issue to this is that sometimes the governments and the bodies are also completely clueless about the realities of cannabis, of CBD. And so there is, to some extent, I believe, what we've seen happening in the vape industry, where these vape associations are forming internationally. We saw on the previous panel here, coming together and helping actually put forward sensible policies. We're seeing that to an extent with cannabis, but the groups are so fragmented. A lot of them are for personal gain, to be quite honest. And we don't quite have that approach of let's try and actually work with the government as an industry to do that. And I think there's never going to be a perfect group everyone would want to join, but some sort of code of conduct might be a future next step.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we have.
22 minutes.
22 minutes.
Oh, okay, never mind. I thought it was 30 minutes.
I would add that to that. It's not just on the lawmaking side, this lack of information. It's also now everybody in Germany is jumping on it to produce cannabis. And I have also a lot of talks with some companies, some flower farmers, and cannabis, it's a plant, but they have special needs. And funny story, I just asked them, I visit them, I just showed their greenhouse, everything, and then I asked them, what are your plans for drying the cannabis? And they had no clue. They're thinking, okay, after the plants are ready, we cut them, hang them under the lights, put the lights on for 2 days, and then everything is dry. And so, yeah, perfect. And the next step is you put everything in the trash and start from the beginning, because then you destroyed the product. Then we have the problem that we don't have a good raw material.
And then look at Thailand is a great example of that right now.
100%.
Yeah.
So then NGPs, let's talk about that. Where does that start and where does it stop? Is an edible going to eventually be considered an NGP, or is it already?
So I think it's a very difficult question to say where it starts, right? So
I think any new form factor is an NGP, right? Because even within the gummy category, as an example, there's still, again, so much unknown, and there's so much trial and error that goes into that. I'd argue any product that's not flower, that's at least been around for some time, is an NGP product, according to me.
would agree on this because it's always a combination, right, of the drug itself and then the application form. And therefore, I will agree totally that it is everything new to us.
So it's anything that you're just not smoking.
Somehow, yes, I would say so. But what are the others to think about
very
and
broad.
agree on that, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
It's really new.
So then that kind of makes me scary, now just being on this path of who's responsible. But when we start to look at this, now this is such a broad range all of a sudden. And it's so vast, it's so open, and it's so unexplored still. Even though, I mean, there's a million brands out there right now selling different types of vape products. Who's better, who's not, who's regulating this? And if this is going to be in the future of cannabis, for example, so if we reverse this, if this is the future of cannabis, again, is this not detrimental to the growth that we're hoping to achieve in the cannabis industry?
I would like to just add here that a lot of the next-gen innovation we're seeing is also coming from either the US or Canada recreational/medical markets. And some of that innovation has happened under GMP and to very high pharmaceutical standards. So I think trying to lean on innovations, for example, of gummies, of specific formulations that have been used either in regulated areas of the North American markets or now in the European medical markets. I've got a client looking to develop, for example, tablets in the UK market. And that would all be to GMP, and those are the type of standards I think we should be looking towards rather than the whole massive plethora of kind of consumer products, which those companies should never really have to produce to GMP if they're not producing a medicine. But those levels of quality and testing, I don't think are going to come from the mass market consumer space. I think they may come from the more pharma-driven cannabis space.
I'd also, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'd also add, it's very different product than tobacco, right? Cannabinoids are much safer, I'd argue, than nicotine in many ways. We've had a legal program in Canada for 5 years and the sky hasn't fallen. We haven't seen some crazy health outcomes where people are developing lung damage or any other issues.
But that was in the US, though. There was some study,
the US
people
is
died.
that's an unregulated market. Like Lily was saying, you've got GMP, GACP, GPP, you've got a federal regulator like
But
Health
these
Canada.
products are still being available, sold in, like, these are still products that are crossing borders and being consumed.
Well, from Canada, you're not crossing borders unless it's medical products. And there's no safety issue with Canadian products.
Yeah.
The US is a very unregulated market, so to compare unregulated to a regulated market, you're not comparing GMP and what I would argue is a completely unregulated product, not even GACP coming out of the US. So you're not comparing apples to apples there.
I just wanted to jump in the point of GMP because it's good manufacturing processes, right? But we internally say, give me more paper because it's just a paperwork. And it's crazy because they can be written bullshit over 100 pages and it's still GMP. So therefore, watch out here. GMP does not mean that this is a perfect way to produce.
It's a low standard.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Good
a
point.
standard. And in pharma, I mean, when we see of standards and there are new products, for example, actually gummy bears, it's a nightmare, right? Because we see that at the beginning, you weight or balance 100% of what you would like to have as an active. At the end, only 20% remain. Why? Because by producing the gummy bears, you heat up for 120 degrees. You let it for 120 degrees for 3 hours by steering the system under air condition. It means oxidization and so on and so forth. You see really a drop, like 100% start, woof, 20%. And therefore, what the industry is doing, and this is quite fun, instead of changing the process and adapting it, the easiest way is to just balance more at the beginning. So you have all the byproducts where you don't know what happened. Of the 80%, no one knows what happened, but it's under GMP controlled conditions. So therefore, GMP is very important, I agree. Sometimes not really trustable because we are so new, and that's the
Great
problem.
And when you look to the medical market in Germany, where everything should be GMP, but when you look what's happened now in Portugal, where all the products from all over the world, from Colombia, from Thailand, comes in as non-GMP products, and then we have the GMP washing, packaging, all that, and in the end, if you look in the detail, that's not the GMP product. because just it was packed in a GMP facility doesn't make it, in my opinion, into a GMP
It's a
product.
loophole, right?
Which ties back into the argument, right? I think a discussion earlier was around how the German product is so much safer. My argument would be it's not, because you're getting GMP washed product that regulators aren't really looking at, right? So I think there's, again, that balance and risk there.
But
So who's responsible?
The regulator, I mean, again, listen, you come back to Canada, right? For example, we've had a legal program for 5 years. We don't allow imported products to come in. So there's at least a base level of standardization. It's not GMP, and the regulator intentionally didn't make it GMP, but it's at least GPP or GACP, right? So there is some basic standard. You have to start somewhere. You can't start right at the top.
But I think we're already ahead of the game when you look at cannabis versus tobacco, no offense. Because again, the amount of chemicals and everything that's going into this product that is allowed,
Yeah.
right? It's very different.
It is really different. So because I'm doing also some consultant work on this, and there were some customers asking for how we can get GMP, for example. And they are literally working with ketchup squeezers to squeeze their products in something. And I was like, okay, this is a long way to go. Don't plan with this year. So we need at least 1 year, at least 10 months to get the quality and the high standard as we need. But you see, due to the fact that more and more people are asking for such of consultancy, it means that they have an awareness. So I can clearly see the trend that the interest goes into increasing the quality. This is good, but it's also a good question, who is responsible for it? At the end, regulation, right? At the end, law and regulation. This is the only thing we have, which is a pull and push principle. So push, I mean the customers, but pull, I mean, is regulation and law, and therefore the governance.
Yeah, but for all that, I think it's important to have like a legalized market, because then our companies, big companies, are willing to invest because lower risk, and more people are openly to consume other kind of products, because they have more trust to consume legal products than the products from your black market dealer, where you never know what's inside.
Exactly.
You know, so that's why I think like with this all over the world ongoing process of the decriminalization, legalization, that will give a huge push in this NGPs, because now more and more people are openly to think about it, to find some new ways to consume cannabis, to have healthier ways, more efficient ways to consume, because smoking is not the best way to consume cannabis products. If you want to have a good effect, if you want to have a healthy effect, smoking is one of the worst ways to consume cannabis.
So then what about, you brought up the illicit market too, what about the illicit market when it comes to vape products?
In terms of pre-filled kind of grey illicit market e-liquids, it's been an area where we've seen a lot of health risks.
That's a huge challenge in the UK.
It's becoming a bit concerning in, for example, the UK. We're now seeing a lot more in, for example, 5 years ago, it's quite hard to find even disposable THC vapes in the UK. Now it's becoming increasingly popular among just general dealers. It's not really among sophisticated or online groups. It's becoming a bit more commonplace. And I think what's become very prevalent is a lot of those products are not even THC. They're HHC often now, being sold as THC. Again, that adds a whole other layer of complication. Do we even know the HHC is safe with the hardware, for example? A whole new synthetic compound that we have even less data on. So I think, people are still going to consume those products, but I think there's a huge consumer awareness thing. When you ask even UK consumers, do you know what a dry herb vaporizer is? Most of them will have absolutely no idea, and yet way more effective than combusting, would save them a lot of money, more discreet in an illegal market, but that awareness just isn't there, and so that also needs to be built.
But then this is a funny thing, because if they have the dry herb vaporizer, where do they get the herb from?
I do agree that it would be safer for consumers to use illicit cannabis in a dry herb vaporizer than to buy a THC cartridge off the illicit market. Yeah. Because I know that there's obviously risks of illicit cultivation, but in general, I think it's playing with something we know, the plant, rather than... There has been a lot of very harmful substances. There's been fentanyl even found in UK THC vapes. And those are being sold to young people. They're able to have them at school. They're not able to smoke a joint or vape flower in areas because of the smell. So I think it creates a whole nother set of issues when we're having those formats available. Not to say we shouldn't have them, but they're becoming huge issues, yeah.
Yeah, and we saw recently in Czech what's happened. You bring up with the HHC stuff. What's happened? We had there the HHC gummies, THCP, THCO gummies, and what happened? The children use it accidental, and people die from it because, like, when you look at HHCO or HHCP, that's even you can have like 30 times that effect than normal HHC, and if you try just one hit too much, you are done, you know. And the people doesn't really know how to handle that kind of product. When you look at THCP products, it took up to 2 hours before you get an effect. And in this time, when you always give another hit because you don't feel nothing, and then after the 10 or 12 hits, you are out for like 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. And this is quite interesting because, you know, the medicines are made bitter because you do not have the effect directly, but you see, oh, it's bitter, it must be something ongoing, and you stop eating it. But gummy bears are sweet, they are tasty, and you think, okay, I have no effect at all. One gummy would make it. So, and then you take the second and third, and it's really unresponsible to give it to children, especially because it looks like a normal gummy bear. You do not know what's inside. It's not only sugar, which is already unhealthy, but then there are tons of other things, and therefore I think it's really a risk factor here, and it's underestimated how it's made because the dose make it a medicine or something toxic, and it's really underestimated. Yeah.
That's actually a very interesting point. I never really thought of it that way. So that's another thing. Gummies shouldn't be sweet.
And then no one is buying it, you know? That's the problem as well.
I think the answer to all this is legalization, right? Because if you want to actually address all these problems, you got to legalize the product, right? That's the only 100%. Way to be able to move people. I mean, you look at Canada and you look at the gummy example you made, you actually can't add sugar as an example directly to gummy. So, you know, it's through regulation that you're actually going to address these issues.
Interesting. All right, guys, we're at our 5 minutes. So I was going to say, let's start with Lily. And maybe just anything you want to add or something you want to wrap up?
For sure. I think the most important thing I would say is for both groups, the cannabis industry and for the nicotine and tobacco and NGP industries, to be open to learning from each other and to collaborations. I think this is something that not one sector can tackle on their own, and there's learnings from both sides that I think really need to be incorporated. There's a lot the cannabis sector can offer in terms of the deep consumer base, the experience of the product, the passion, the regulated markets, and then there's also stuff that the tobacco industry can learn. And I think this attitude we sometimes see from both sides of hostility is not helpful. And I think everyone does recognize the harms of products like tobacco, but we need to have a more mature discussion about this merging and this collaboration is happening. So let's do it in the best way that we can build a long-term and healthy and profitable and enjoyable sector for everyone.
Yeah, I would say we all could be very happy to live in that time now with all this legalization movement all over the world. That brings up a lot of opportunities for us, for a lot of businesses. Right now we have no clue what will come in the next 5 years because this is all so fresh, so new. All the science will jump on now, and we will have in the next couple of years totally new ways of consumption, and that will be very, very interesting. And there are a lot of, I think, opportunities to make good business.
Yeah, I think we have to learn from each other. It's like legalization happened in other countries. We have to look into it. We have to learn from what happened before. Cannabis, for example, is an old plant. Why we are not using the data already existing and doing some consolidation of it? Everything is confidential when I'm doing some studies, right? Why not open it? Why not everyone should profit from it? This is number one, I think. And number two is, what I think is also very important, is we have to speak louder because, I mean, as you mentioned, regulation, no clue what they are doing. They are not from pharmacy, they're not from cannabinoids, nothing. So therefore, I think it's also somehow a watch out for us and our group to be very active, to communicate. And therefore, I think it's very good that we are here and we have this stage from EVO NXT, thanks, to make it happen, that we are talking to them. We are a voice and we should use it really very well here.
Yeah, I think in addition to what everyone said, I would agree completely on learning from mistakes that have been made. I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing happening in Europe is not learning from the mistakes that Canada made and making those same mistakes, or looking to address issues that haven't already been looked at. So I think you need to just look across the ocean to North America to see what's the good, what's the bad. There's certainly a lot of bad, but there's some good too, and figure it out from there. I mean, again, cannabis legalization is very much a process, not an event.
Yes.
We have
Last
2 more
words
minutes.
for you.
No, my mind is still stuck on, I think the governments need to take a more active role providing education for any product. It's any industry and any product. And Canada has gone out of their way to make sure cigarettes are less and less appealing and super inconvenient to consume. And I think that's a good thing. And it's just, but Europe is so different. I think anyways, it's interesting to see what the future holds. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you so much for your insights, my wonderful panelists. And thank you for having us on your stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we take one picture quickly?
Yes, thank you very much. Wow, so loud.
Once he's
I tried talking not as loud. I'm so sorry. Well, thank you very much for being here with us. You have been the last ones to attend this stage because now all talks are over, and of course the 2 days are over now. It's sad, I know, but we still have something for you, and we have the DJ. And he wants to make some music for the next 1.5 hours. And you can dance with us as you want to. I know Ben is a great dancer. So if you want to, you can just dance with him. I know that he's a great dancer. Sung Myung is also a great dancer. So, well, just attend us. And for everyone who's not up to dancing, thank you very much for being here with us. It has been a pleasure to meet all of you again. I hope we will see most of you again in September at the Intertabak, or maybe next year when we have the EVO NXT then again. And please enjoy the music, enjoy the rest of the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.